I've got a cool new app to show you today. It's called Multiband, and this is a free app. You can download it on the App Store. This app does one thing, and it does it very nicely, and it does it very simply. All this app does is take your input, split it based on frequency into anywhere between 1 and 4 bands, and give you separate outputs for each frequency. So I'm going to start with 2 bands here. So what's happening here is this synthesizer, Xeon, is sending an output, and it's going into the first instance, the first input of multiband. Now this isn't useful unless I have as many, let me show you. I'm going to go to the second track here, and I'm looking at multi-bus audio unit instances. Notice I'm not going to audio unit extension. Multi-bus audio unit instances. And I see that in the list I have this one to choose. And you can see, I don't know if you can see this in the video, but there's a number 2 here on these gray icons that appeared next to this. So let me explain what's going on here. Xeon is sending sound in here, and it's being split into 2 bands, and band 1 is coming out here, and band 2 is coming out here. And these 2 icons are not 2 different effects or 2 different instances of one effect. They are both pointing to this window, this instance of this effect. And you can see that because if I touch this one, you'll see this light up at the bottom. Watch this. So that points to this window, and if I touch here, you'll see the same thing. So both of these icons are 2 icons pointing to one window, and this one instance of the app is taking one input but giving us 2 outputs. Now you might wonder what happens to this, because the icon suggests that there's a second input here too. In this particular app, we just ignore it. That's the way AUM is designed, so that when you have second input, you also have a second output. But in our case, we're just using the output without the input. So if I were to, put a microphone on this track, that won't do anything for me. Okay, so I could then continue on to add a 3rd band and go again to multi-bus audio unit instances and do it again. And now I'd have 1, 2, 3. Each of these 3 tracks represents each of my 3 bands of output. So let's have a look at this. I'm going to open up cutoff frequency a little bit. Hope that doesn't bother our ears too much. And I'm going to put a spectrogram on these three things. And let's do another one. Right. Close these views out so you just see the spectrogram. That's not what I wanted. And let's get a 3rd one. Just for fun, I'll use the Tone Boosters spectrogram this time. This is a free plugin from Tone Boosters. Right. Okay, so this is mid, this is bass, this is mid, this is the highs. And as you can see, this track is outputting the lows, this is outputting somewhere in the middle, and the high frequencies are coming out on this side. So the next thing that I could do with this, actually I'm going to do away with this and simplify things up. Let's go back down to just 2 tracks. And I could now start applying effects individually to these 2 tracks. So I'm going to put Magic Death Eye compressor on the bass end, and we'll just leave the oscilloscope showing us a spectrogram on the high end. Right. So why would you want to do this? Well, there are a lot of apps. I wouldn't say a lot. If we look at the desktop platform, there are quite a few apps that do multiband processing. On iOS, we have a few apps that do effects multiband. We've made some ourselves, and there are some nice ones that do like multi-effect suites where you get reverb and delay and compression and a whole set of different effects that you can apply to different frequency bands. But that's always kind of a limiting scenario because you can only apply the effects that the developer of this multiband effects suite develops for you. You can't just put any effect you want. So in this case, for example, a lot of people love this Magic Death Eye compressor because it has this very groovy, a lot of character in the saturation. And I've often thought it would make a lot of sense for certain sounds that I use to have this kind of saturation on just the bass. And obviously this is not a multiband compressor, so that it doesn't work like that. But now that we have this multiband app, you can put these two together and Magic Death Eye can become a multiband compressor just by putting another instance of it on the second track. And so it's a little bit messy in terms of having a lot of stuff on the screen. Let's close this one down to simplify. But now I have essentially a multiband Magic Death Eye compressor where I control my cutoff frequency between the two bands up here, and then I can separately adjust the settings on each band so that they'll be compressed differently. Right. So that's step one of what this app does. And up to now, we've not looked at anything down below in the bottom half of the screen. I'll stop right now because it's coming to my mind. We put these two logos on here. This is our own Blue Mango logo, but down below is a Beat Community logo. And the reason that's there is that we got the idea for this app from Mr. Ali Ahmed, who runs the Beat Community group on Facebook. And so that's our shout out to him for giving us a good app idea. Now, as we look at the bottom half of this UI, there's a lot of stuff that's disabled and doesn't do anything because I'm in multi-output mode. But there's a second mode here, which is linked group mode. And I'm going to, what should we do with that? Let's take this off. So linked group mode is designed for us to support audio unit hosts that don't support multi-output yet. So at the time that we're making this video, most of the major iOS digital audio workstation apps don't allow you to do this thing that I'm doing here in AUM, where I have one track putting input and then the output is going out to several tracks. I believe that it will come very soon in at least one of the really big iOS workstation apps, but at the time we make this video, it's not there yet. So there's a workaround that we could do, and I'll set it up for you right now. In fact, let's take all this stuff off. Let's take that off. And I'm gonna send this output to a mix bus A, right? And then I'm gonna take mix bus A coming in here, and again coming in here. Okay, so what's going on now is Xeon is sending is generating sound, and it's going into mix bus A, and then mix bus A is splitting that into two separate tracks. Now this is something that AUM does, and not other DAWs may not necessarily do this. Other host apps may not necessarily do this, but if you really need to, you could do it this way. You could just get a second instance of Xeon up there, and you could have the second instance also take its MIDI input from the keyboard, and now I've got the same thing coming out in both of these tracks. In fact, let's go with that, because that's really that's the way that I think most people are going to end up using this if you're in a host app that doesn't support multi-output. So if you were, let's say you were in Cubasis, for example, and at the time we're making this video, Cubasis doesn't support multi-output, you would duplicate whatever track you'd have, you'd duplicate it twice. If it's a MIDI instrument, you do what I've done here, where you have it twice, or if it's audio, you'd make a copy of the audio onto a second track. And then for each copy of the track, you put one instance of multiband. And notice here, I'm going into audio unit extension. I'm not taking the multi-bus output. I'm just taking a second instance. So now if I open this and I open this, these are two different instances. If I press on this icon, you see it's lighting up here. And when I press this one, it's lighting up over here because these are two different instances. Right. So the way this is going to work is you're not going to go in multi-output mode. You're going to switch to linked group mode. And now we have these choices, several options. The first one is the link group. So right now I've got this in link group 1 and this is in link group 1. And that means that all the instances that are in link group 1 will follow each other. And this is what I mean. Watch this. When I add a band here, this one also adds a band. And the reason it did that is because they are linked instances. Linked just means they watch each other and they copy each other. So if I were to put this on band 5, they're not linked anymore. But when I go back to band 1, link group 1, they are now linked and they'll follow each other. If I move the cutoff frequency, they're both going to move. So this allows us to do multiband processing. It's more cumbersome, but it allows us to do basically the same thing by selecting which output bands are going to be processed by which inputs, instances. So I've got this instance, which is instance 2, if you can see that, processing output band 2, which is on this the yellow section labeled bus 2 here. And this one is processing output band 1. Now if I want, I could actually output both bands from a single instance, and that would be useful, not in this case, I don't think that's useful there, but it would be useful if you wanted to do processing on a mid band and then leave the low and high frequencies unprocessed. For example, I could put the low and highs here and put the mid here, that's exactly how I have this configured. So let's leave it like that, and let's demonstrate how this setup would go again. So this is bands 1 and 3, the low frequencies and the high frequencies, which I'm leaving alone. And this is just band 2. And now I can go back and apply, let's do Magic Death Eye again. I can put this Magic Death Eye effect here. And now the effect is going to affect, it's going to be doing the compression on this yellow band, the mid band only, and band 1 and band 3 will not be affected. So obviously this second way that we're doing here, it's a bit more complicated because you have to duplicate the input. So especially if the input is audio, that could be cumbersome. You wouldn't want to be editing it when you're doing this, but when you've got the editing done, you can make a copy of it and then you can get by with this. But I consider this like a fallback method that we use for apps that don't support the multi-output feature. Just to make sure that you can still use this plugin when you're using those apps. So currently, with the current version of Cubasis, this is the way I would be using the app in there. But obviously, with AUM and with other apps that do multi-output, I would want to go back to multi-output mode instead of linked group mode. That is all I wanted to say about this plugin, and I think we'll end the video here. One more thing I want to add is if you like this video, hit subscribe so that next time you're watching YouTube, that similar videos from us will be prioritized in your YouTube video feed. And if you like us and just want to be a nice person, hit the like button because that will help our video get ranked higher and more people to see it. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can hit the like button on our page if you're interested to see more content like this. And if you want to buy this app, you don't have to buy it because it's free, but we will put a link in the app description at the bottom of the video.